Nearly a century ago, America was called the arsenal of democracy. We didn't just fight our enemies, we outproduced them. Today, our factories, shipyards, and supply chains can't keep pace with two peer competitors rapidly accelerating their preparations for war with us. That's a choice, and it's a choice we can and must reverse through new policies and help build the workforce we need, rebuild industrial capacity through new policies that help ensure that our reform to our acquisition systems and we align our defense budget and national security strategy. It's not the first time we find ourselves in this dilemma. Then, as now, our secret weapon is our capacity to innovate. Before consideration of potential solutions, it's important, I think, that we understand the problem clearly. Since the end of the last Cold War with the Soviet Union, we systemically squandered our military's capacity and capability that deterred our adversary and ensured our victory. We retained some of the most advanced combat systems ever developed, like the B-2s that flawlessly executed Operation Midnight Hammer, destroying Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity. Far too many of our primary combat systems, unfortunately, were developed in the 70s and are now reaching or beyond their service lifespan. The pursuit of ambiguous aims and decades of conflict in the Middle East after 9/11 consumed precious blood and treasure, and despite the valiant performance of our men and women in uniform, it's difficult to find a dividend worthy of their sacrifice. U.S. military spending as a percentage of GDP has peaked around 40% during World War II, hovered between 10 and 15% during the last Cold War. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, it fell to 3.5%. It rose briefly in 2010 to 5.7%, dropping to 2.7% last year in 2024. Thankfully, President Trump has arrested this decline, and in response to grave threats, our U.S. military spending this year in July exceeded $1 trillion and now 3.5% of GDP. With passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, again, reversing decline and addressing unprecedented threats. The Defense Department's China Military Power Report estimated that China, on the other hand, was spending and underestimating its spending by 40 to 90%. Senator Sullivan estimated their real defense spending was as high as $700 billion, and our own Wilson Beaver estimated it's closer to $750 billion, or just under 4% of its GDP. While we depleted our resources, China has dramatically accelerated its military growth and imperial designs of expansion, presenting the most serious threat our nation has ever faced, as our index of U.S. military strength is cataloged for over a decade. Between 76 and 96, American shipyards built an average of more than 3 Los Angeles-class attack submarines per year. In contrast, its replacement, the Virginia-class submarine, has a production rate of just 1.1 submarines per year. Meanwhile, China is building 4.5 to 6 every year and projected to expand its force to 80 from 65, and we currently have only 71. At the beginning of this year, we had 296 ships in the battle force, the combatants that actually engage in combat. By December, we'll have 287. We've decommissioned more ships over this year than we've ordered in the current fiscal crisis. We have appropriated a significant amount, but our Navy, central to power projection and security of our essential trade routes, is smaller, or will be smaller 2 years from now, and far below the congressionally mandated 355 and the Navy's estimate of 381, neither of which account or keep pace with the growing threat. In contrast, China is estimated to have more than 370 ships, recently a distinct negative development, considering our Navy was much larger until it was overtaken in the last decade. Their shipyards are building now commercial tonnage at a rate that exceeds the entire number of ships we've built since the conclusion of the Second World War. From the United States' entry into World War II in 1941 till its end in 1945, we produced 300,000 planes. During the Cold War, we developed the first operational jet fighter in 143 days. Fighter development now takes over a decade. Today, the maximum F-35 annual production rate is 156. China is accelerating jet fighter production with annual output that potentially exceeds 100 J-20 stealth fighters a year and over 100 J-16s. China's nuclear weapon industry is building 100 pits, or the plutonium core of a nuclear warhead, every year. It's taken us 14 years since the start of the nuclear modernization program to complete our first in decades. Recall that we produced 7,000 warheads in 1960 alone and averaged 1,000 warheads a year well into the 70s. How do we reverse the decline in contrast to China? The good news is we've got a president and a vice president in the White House that understand these issues. They prioritize realigning our strategy, re-equipping our military, and reindustrializing America. This week's strike on narco-traffickers in international waters in the Caribbean, the latest reflection of what peace through strength can mean. President Trump and Vice President Vance and Republican majorities in Congress have taken few critical steps, and it's worth recognizing them. Expanding the industrial labor force, lowering barriers to capital investment, updating antiquated defense acquisition processes, and aligning budget with strategy and the growing threat, and bringing down barriers that hinder cooperation with allies. But again, this trend of neglect has taken decades to take root, and it'll take decades to reverse. To update the inefficient acquisition process, he signed the Modernizing Defense Acquisition and Spurring Innovation in the Defense Industrial Base Executive Order. It supports non-traditional contractors, encouraging faster acquisition with less bureaucracy, and newer innovators such as Anduril, Palantir, SpaceX, and Castilian, led by Alex Karp, Shyam Sankar, Palmer Luckey, and Elon Musk, are now supplementing prime contractors, developing weapons for speed, scale, and iterability. But as Will pointed out, there's a lot of progress that remains to be made, but the door is now finally opening. To remind all of you, I'm not mentioning company names because we take defense contractor money. I assure you, Heritage still takes no money from defense contractors or governments, including our own. President Trump issued also the first Reforming Foreign Defense Sales to Improve Speed and Accountability executive order, reduces self-imposed barriers to increasing our export to our American-made arms to our partners and allies. It's pivotal to building their capacity, increasing burden sharing, and lessening the load that disproportionately has sat on the United States for far too long. Congress has taken important steps also. They passed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, enables full and immediate expensing of equipment, research and development, and new provision, specifically lowering the cost to build new factories and develop new products within the United States. Senator Wicker put forth the Forged Act. Most of that now finds itself into the current draft of the National Defense Authorization Act, and it speeds up acquisition process and removes some red tape. More needs to be done, and innovation is a critical part of it. Revitalizing the defense industrial base starts with ensuring industry has a clear demand signal. Industry will only build what's ordered and will only invest in what it knows a production facility is likely to produce. That means ordering consistent quantities of ships, planes, munitions, and other equipment over the long term. As Arthur Herman put it in his book, Freedom's Forge, all you had to do was put in the orders, finance the plant expansion, and stand back and let it happen. Without unambiguous demand signal, it's difficult for industry leaders to justify investing in their own capital, hiring more workers, and expanding infrastructure at their shipyards or factories. These efforts have to continue, ensuring education funding is provided for defense industrial base to produce the workforce needed to man it, while setting up our workers for success in the job market. Certificates in the trades and graduating STEM degrees, I think we'll find, are all more valuable than producing humanities degrees in many of our elite universities. According to the American Welding Society, there'll be a projected 320,000 welders required by 2029 alone. As Senator Cotton recently observed, we must invest not only in munitions, critically for the defense of America, but also in the workforce that can build these weapons and ensure our military's readiness, and he's right. Congress should amend existing programs such as tax-preferred 529 college savings plans to fund post-secondary certificate and apprenticeship programs rather than, again, four-year degrees. Expanding the defense industrial base also means securing our supply chains, and many, including Jeb on the panel today, have forgotten more about it than most of us, including myself, will ever know. But it can be done by eliminating single points of failure. The Congressional Research Service alone estimates that 70%, or some 16,000 Virginia-class submarine suppliers, are sole source. Unnecessary regulatory requirements currently make building factories, including mines needed to provide us with critical minerals, time-consuming and often functionally impossible. Just last week in Detroit, we were reminded as a radical progressive and terrorist sympathizer suggested the disruption of the F-35 supply chain, reminding us of domestic vulnerabilities. Upcoming AI-enabled protracted U.S. simulation conducted by the Heritage Foundation, which we call Tidal Wave, is an unprecedented effort to assess vulnerabilities of both sides to protect and sustain their forces in combat. This, we believe, will demonstrate clearly, providing detailed recommendations to the administration and Congress on both sides. The National Association of Manufacturers estimates the total cost of federal regulations in the U.S. economy estimated over $3 trillion, 12% of our GDP. Reducing these regulations is critical, and Congress can pass an act that we believe will enable national security zones to expedite or waive permitting requirements such as the National Environmental Protection Act. The national security zones could provide financial incentives to more easily build defense industrial base capacity, making it cheaper to build factories we need to produce the military equipment required to prevail. Finally, we need to increase cooperation with our allies, including the removal of barriers to co-production and co-development. The International Trafficking in Arms Regulation, or ITAR, impose onerous requirements on defense producers trying to cooperate with companies even in friendly allied countries. We should work to create a secure bubble of defense industrial cooperation, encouraging our friends to match our own regulations as Australia did in advance of AUKUS, to make cooperation easier. If trusted allies and partners accept information security and export control policies equivalent to those of the United States, we should treat their defense producers as if they're complying with their own policies, which in effect they are. To conclude, the pro-growth economic policies of the Trump administration have arrested a decline, have begun the process of reversing it, but it will take concerted effort to complete the work. We need to expand the industrial labor force, send a strong demand signal to industry by purchasing larger orders for ships and aircraft, as well as munitions to deter China and unleash the ingenuity of the American people, getting the government out of the way, cutting red tape and regulations that have impeded progress for decades. We have been here before. In 1940, just 0.04% of our industrial capacity supported a neglected military unprepared for the coming conflict. The U.S. converted its industrial-based production to produce military goods on a scale never before seen. 297,000 aircraft, 190,000 artillery pieces, 86,000 tanks, and 2 million trucks in 3 years. American innovation produced twice the volume of the Axis powers and was responsible for 2/3 of all Allied military equipment produced during the war. Ford's Charles Sorensen introduced efficient manufacturing, the Willow Run plant that produced a B-24 bomber every hour by 1944. MIT's Carl Compton dramatically accelerated the development and fielding of radar, providing Allied forces essential advantage in just over a year. Henry Kaiser's shipyards produced 800 of the 2,710 total Liberty ships constructed by the United States, reducing construction time for an equivalent ship from 2 years per hull to an astounding 5 days by the end of the war. Vannevar Bush led the Office of Scientific Research and Development, governing the Manhattan Project, which, as you all know, produced the world's first atomic weapon in 3 years. American ingenuity and innovation ensured victory in the Second World War, provided the foundation for victory in the Cold War, and with the Soviet Union, and ushered in an unprecedented period of American prosperity that could make the industrial defense base great again. Thank you.